Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope, the podcast that goes along with the Parishscope newsletter of St. John's Lutheran Church, Sam Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Dreamus. I'm the contemporary music person at the church.
Okay, you went from guy
Here's the thing.
to like director.
I know.
To like
But
person.
I don't think I'm technically the director. I don't know. That's the problem. Is I don't have an official title. I don't think.
You know what we need to do?
I really don't.
We need to like we need to just put initials, and then because nobody knows what that is, right?
Right.
We'll call you DGP, and that stands for Director Guy Person.
Yeah.
And
I'm the contemporary DGP.
Yeah, you're the contemporary music DGP.
That's a good one.
I like it, and or you could put it before. I'm DGP Corey Dreamus. And it'll work.
Well, I'll go with Casey, but
yeah.
He said Corey. It's all
Did
right.
I really? Oh my goodness!
It happens.
See, I'm going to go back and listen to this recording later. I'm like, I call you Corey.
I have my oldest brother's named Cody. So my whole entire life, every teacher called me Cody. Like pretty much they call me a whole school
now
year.
It's too late. You're just Corey now.
It happens,
Look, I'm gonna own my mistakes, but now I feel like everybody should own it. Corey.
I also the first job I had out of college was at a concert venue, and for some reason they had hired. It was kind of a freak accident. Like probably 10 people on staff started with a C. There was like Colton, Connor, like Corey, Casey. There was a ton, and so they were always confused. And when someone would like not show up to work, the next time they'd like run up to like Colton and be like, "Where the heck were you at work?" And they're like, "No, that was Connor." And like, "Oh, sorry." And then they couldn't keep it straight. It was really kind of funny, but yeah.
Well, I do apologize for getting your name wrong. Apparently,
that's all right.
That's going to be a thing now.
It happens all the time.
It's just what I do. I get people's names wrong. Oh man, oh boy, You know what I hate? Like I hate it whenever like I do one of these segues, and it's like. We're pretty excited, we're pretty happy, we're laughing, and then I get this like really serious story lined up.
Oh yeah. Oh, see, there we go. That's it. But it's just how it is.
I know it is. It's just how it is. But whenever I was thinking like, what can I talk about today? News story of the day. Boy, howdy! It's hard to get around without talking about what's going on in the Middle East right now.
Yeah,
it's everywhere. It's just everywhere. And so I actually did want to talk about what's going on in the Middle East a little bit. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of what's happened. Basically, what is it, 5 days ago, a group of people from the Gaza Strip, which is a Palestinian area, led by the Hamas, which is an active terrorist group. Mm-hmm. They basically kind of led this invasion basically into a corner of Israel. They did it in the middle of a music festival that was going on there.
Oh, jeez.
They attacked by sea, by land. They tunneled. They just went nuts with it, and pretty devastating. They killed a lot of people. I guess like if we looked at like the history books, it wouldn't be that many. But at the same time, you got to remember that Israel's the size of New Jersey. Yeah, they killed something like 700 to 900 people. Yeah. I think there are or were some Americans mixed in, but not many. Not many Americans go down to that specific area. But obviously there was some other people involved. Again, a music festival was taking place. So we're not exactly talking about going army to army. This is army versus a bunch of unarmed combatants.
Yeah, right.
And so that's kind of what happened. It's pretty horrendous, and it was not done in a, dare I say, like a military fashion. Like they did atrocious things, things that are just not condoned in any form of warfare, and that's kind of what they did, and it's pretty awful. But there's been a lot of pushback from kind of various sides. A lot of people obviously are like stand with Israel, but then a lot of people have kind of gone back and said, well, the Palestinians are just fighting for their freedom, and so it leaves you with a couple different things. First of all, it leads you to the question of what is Israel in terms of a nation, and are they really dare I say, enslaving people or are holding people away from freedoms? And unfortunately, there's no real good way to put this, because if we used our Western terminology and the way we view things, we would almost have to say that Israel is not doing anything wrong, and that the Palestinians have definitely done a lot wrong. Now, it gets a little deeper in the weeds whenever you start, going through that, and there's definitely been some back and forth over the years. As you know, or maybe you don't know, but like Israel was kind of, dare I say, reestablished in 1947, I believe it was, 46, 47. It was after World War II, and it was kind of established kind of as a way to have those that were Jewish have kind of a place to be.
Right.
Now, of course, whenever they made that establishment, as there was people there, and they kind of had to work around that. Israel, over the years, though, has been attacked several times. They have defended themselves. They have defended their own. And again, I don't want to say that Israel's never been aggressive. They have at times. I don't want to say that Palestine has never been aggressive. They have many, many times. 9 times out of 10, it seems like the Palestinians are the more aggressive or the aggressors in that regard. But it also leads to questions about, like, what about Israel? And should Israel be there? And I hate to say this, but this is even theological.
Yeah.
Because there are some Christian groups that firmly believe that in order for Jesus to return, Israel needs to be a established and happy nation. They look at some of the prophecies of the return of the tribes, the prophecies of, say, like Jeremiah, where, God promises them to prosper and be wealthy. And they say, well, because this hasn't quite happened yet, they've always been under Roman control or so on and so forth, that Israel as a nation has to exist in order for the end times to be. Some of these groups are called Zionistic. What it comes from is a form of what's known as dispensational theology. Have you ever heard of that one?
No.
Okay. So dispensational theology, and it is very, very popular among a lot of people. But dispensation theology basically breaks things up into different times. And they call these different times dispensations. Now, depending on which group you go to, you can find some that are very rigid, and you can find others that are maybe a little less so. So I'll give you an example of a very, very rigid group. One of them, believe it or not, I think this is funny, the Salvation Army. Most people do not realize that the Salvation Army is a church.
You're right. Yeah.
It is a church.
It is.
However, they are very strong dispensationalists, if I remember correctly. And so what they believe is that, so for instance, that Jesus came, died on the cross, and rose again for the salvation of mankind. They believe that. But they also believe that the early church was its own time frame. So they believe that the command to go and baptize and to receive the Lord's Supper was part of that early church formation, and that dispensation is over. And since that dispensation is over, they've now moved on to another one, but that's why they don't necessarily have church gatherings. They don't necessarily have holy baptism. They don't necessarily do the Lord's Supper, because they believe that time frame is over. And so they've moved on to a different dispensation. Well, dispensationalists, whenever they look at certain prophetic texts, firmly believe that Israel needs to be reestablished and that Jews need to come back out of the diaspora, that is the disbursement, where they were dispersed. And because of that, some of them believe that in order for that to happen, in order for Jesus to return, Israel has to be a flourishing nation. And so for them, it's theological. They firmly believe that Israel has to stand. And so they kind of lace this theology that kind of goes with it. And so for them, you cannot, we have to stop at nothing to help and protect Israel, because Israel has to stand in order for Jesus to return. Personally, I am not a dispensationalist.
Yeah.
And I also firmly believe that whatever God wants, God does. And therefore, if God wants to see the Jewish nation flourish, there's nothing I can do to stop that or help that. Obviously, I hope the things that I do are lined up with, with God's will in terms of his desires, hence the 10 Commandments and all these kind of fun and exciting things that we talk about sometimes. But in terms of Israel, I don't necessarily buy it. I don't think that my hand is going to help Israel be established so that Jesus can return. I don't think that that's the case. Now, I can go deeper in the weeds in terms of why I'm not dispensationalist, and there's lots and lots of reasons. But by and large, I think the Zionistic theology is not necessarily good theology, and it puts constraints on the Bible where they're not constraints or simply just not there. Gotcha. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Now, all of that being said, and I know different political parties think differently, but if I can be just honest, from everything I've read, and I haven't seen a whole lot, I've seen a few pictures here and there, this attack on Israel is just absolutely heinous. It's awful. It's just absolutely atrocious. And the people that are behind it, the Hamas and all them, they are not, look, if they were freedom fighters, like, they would do this differently.
Yeah, right.
But they're not freedom fighters. They're terrorists. And now they're threatening that if Israel, attacks them, they're going to kill all the hostages. And I mean, again, these are not military people. These are not soldiers. These are, women and children.
Yeah.
And in some cases, even babies. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's already out there.
Yeah.
And so these are pretty heinous attacks. Now, and you don't have to be a great theologian to look at that and say, wow, that's really, really bad.
Yeah.
We can talk about the politics of Palestine versus Israel at some other time. I still tend to agree with Israel, but not for theological reasons. I just tend to agree with it.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, these attacks are just atrocious. Yeah. These are not justified from everything that I've read and can see. Now, again, maybe I'll read something tomorrow and it'll change and sway me, but I don't think so. From everything I've read, it's pretty awful.
Yeah. Well.
So there's a somber us down there a little bit, right?
Yeah. Well, it does. I can't say I know a lot about what exactly is happening over there, so I can't really say too much. But it is. I mean, this is something I've discussed with some people recently, that it's just it's the retaliation thing. It's like, and even like in school, you see kids who one kid gets punched, he turns around and punches a kid as hard as he can, in retaliation. But the teacher doesn't see the first part; they see the second part, and so it's just how you go about things it really can. I don't know. I mean, I don't know whose side I agree. I mean, in all honesty, I don't know whose side I agree with. But when you see something like this, it's kind of hard to go like, well, I get their side. It's hard to say that when you're like, oh, they're doing really horrible things.
Yeah, yeah, and that's just it. I mean, I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, again, from what I've heard, even Israel, before they attacked, they gave the Palestinians like a 2-day warning. And they said, hey, we're going to attack these areas. If you're a woman or a child, get out of there. And again, they control the power grid and the water system. So it's like, again, there's this kind of weird relationship that they have. And it's just, and I mean, look, I went over to Israel. And even when I was in Israel, we went to Bethlehem, which is actually a Palestinian a settlement place. And we went in there and we talked to a Palestinian Christian. And, he kind of explained some things to us. And again, it's one of those things that, like, I think a lot of it goes down to, like, when you get into the Middle East, they think about a lot of things very differently than the way we think. And because of that, it can sometimes really confuse us. And very much the same way. I mean, look, there is no doubt about it that, like, if you are a Palestinian and you want to be and live in the nation of Israel, it comes with some challenges. I mean, some really, really heavy challenges. And it's not real easy. It's much easier if you are Jewish.
Yeah, right.
But if you are not Jewish and if you don't have that ethnic line, it's very challenging. It's very, very challenging. But yet, at the other hand, it's possible. In fact, something like 20% of the population of Israel is actually Palestinian that just live there. So it's not impossible, it's very difficult. It's definitely it's definitely one-sided in terms of like, the Jewish heritage tends to do better because it's easier. It's an easier pathway for them. But it's not impossible. Yeah. At the same time. So, and it is kind of like the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount is a very interesting place. I visited the Temple Mount. Temple Mount has Muslim things on it, Muslim buildings and stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's even guarded by Muslim guards, but also Israeli guards. And what's really fascinating is, and every time I tell this to somebody, they think it's kind of funny, but it makes some kind of logical sense. It's weird, but it makes some sense. And that is like, so the guards on top of the Temple Mount, the Muslim guards have guns but no bullets. And the Israeli guys have guns and bullets and extra bullets.
Oh, wow.
And the idea is that if for some reason Israel were to be attacked, if the attacker was Muslim, the fear is that the then Muslim guards would then have weapons to attack the Israeli guards. And because that is a probability, again, most Palestinians are, in fact, Muslim. Yeah. So they don't have bullets. They have guns but no bullets. But if it's somebody else that's non-Muslim, well, then basically Israel and the Muslims agree they need to get rid of the attacker, in which case they can hand the bullets over.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Wow.
It's a very interesting thing. And it's also interesting to know, and I mean, this is kind of how Israel is, which is to say, here you have this Temple Mount, and you have, these Muslim buildings on top of it, that the Israelis own that land. Mm-hmm. Again, that goes back to I think it's 67 and what they call the 6-Day War and all this kind of stuff. But the Israelis own it. Mm-hmm. But they still don't tear down the Muslim temples and build a new temple, right? They don't. Interesting. They don't do. They technically they own that land. They could. Now it'd probably start World War III or some version of it. It would be awful if they did. But this is kind of one of those things that the Jews, the Israelis, sacrifice in order to maintain peace. Yeah. That they still allow the Muslim buildings to be on top of the Temple Mount, where they feel and believe the Jewish temple should be.
Interesting.
Yeah. And again, it's fascinating to go back and forth. But again, we were able to talk to a Palestinian Christian that was in the area of Bethlehem. And I feel like he did a really good job of kind of trying to piece some of this out. Mm-hmm. And it was very fascinating. He wasn't anti-Israel. He definitely talked about some of the hardships that were caused because he was not, he was Christian, so he's still not Jewish.
Right, yeah.
But he's also a Palestinian in terms of where he lives. And, he definitely had a hard road to go both ways, but he could kind of see it and kind of see that tension that's laid out. Right. And again, there's a long history, and I don't want to sit here and talk about it for days. Yeah. I just really wanted to talk about, again, to me, it was the elephant in the room, right? You have this big thing going on over there, and I think a lot of people are just going, well, what do you do with this? And I think there's a lot of theological baggage that we sometimes bring to the table that's not necessarily good. Mm-hmm. And again, a lot of it has to do with that idea of dispensationalism. But again, even to me, and I know some of them will disagree with me, of course, but to me, I think the big factor is even if the dispensational theologian was right, I don't think they are. I disagree with dispensationalism, but even if they were right, to me, isn't that kind of I don't know, isn't that kind of a lack of faith whenever you say, well, we got to prop up this other nation so that Jesus can, no. Look at the history throughout all of Holy Scripture. Usually the people, even when they have well-meaning and well-intentioned, are working against God, and then God comes along and goes, no, you're silly. You know, they have these great plans, and then God comes along and says, no, I got this. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah, God, I mean, we want to obviously follow God and do what we're asked to do and told to do, but whenever, I don't know, thinking that God can't do these things unless we do this. That's kind of, a little.
Yeah, and I mean, again, to be completely honest, I do not know enough dispensational theology to speak. I just, the very few of them that I've really talked to in depth about this. Mm-hmm. Now, I've run across a lot of people, and I've just kind of had side comments here and there. But in terms of like actually holding a conversation where we're going to sit there for a while and really, really talk this through, of the few that I've talked to, that was probably a correct representation of their thought. Mm-hmm. Now, again, I mean, I don't want to say that there's not other people out there that think and believe differently. I'm sure there are different elements on the spectrum. But as a whole, we do not agree with, as Lutherans, as LCMS Lutherans anyway, we do not agree with flat out dispensational theology.
Gotcha.
We believe that with the ascension of Jesus, that it has ushered in the end times. Mm-hmm. But the end times have obviously been going for some time now. Mm-hmm. And in that regard, we do have a set of times, but it's different than the way the dispensationalists do things. And because of that, they have a tendency to read the book of Revelation in some like unique ways in terms of like they push things into a time front. There are 4 distinct ways to read the book of Revelation. I don't know what they all are, though. No, one is postmillennialism, amillennialism, and then maybe dispensational, and then I forget the last one. I always forget one of them.
Well, maybe we should do a podcast talking about focused on Revelation sometime, because
that would be a much longer podcast.
That might be. But
that would be like a month of straight podcast meeting twice a week. Look. I've taught on Revelation before, and I think I actually do need to teach on it again at church. But to be honest with you, it's a hard hitting book, but it's more than just that it's hard hitting. It's actually just it's just a different way of thinking, and once you understand some of those keys to the thinking and the thought process, the book really does click into place, and then it's kind of fascinating,
right?
And it's really interesting, and it's also, dare I say, I don't want to say boring, but it's a little anticlimactic. Here you have dragons and stuff like that. Well, once you begin to understand what John is saying by using this visual of dragon, you go, oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. It's not like, oh, dragons out of the sky. I mean, hey, look, I read fantasy fiction.
Yes.
Love Middle Ages stuff. I've read books with dragons in them and stuff. I think they're cool. I just do.
Cool.
Man, I'm all over it, but it's not quite what John was saying.
Oh, darn. Well,
I know.
Oh, that's a major letdown.
It is. It is. It really is.
Well, I mean, if there's one thing from talking about this whole subject, it's that we are really. I mean, I always try to have a positive perspective on life, even though I'm a natural pessimist. But I mean, I always just think, somewhere out there's something really horrible going on. There's some sniper sitting in a, I've said that before, but it's like, when people kind of act like they got it all figured out, or, oh, I know what's going on in the world. It's like, we really don't. And we're so lucky that we live in a place where we don't wake up to gunshots every day.
Yeah.
And we don't,
it's true.
We're just,
It's true, and that's a good point too. Like with all this stuff, and I know it's a heavy hitting topic and all that kind of stuff. But the truth is that we're sitting over here talking about it and discussing it because that's what we're gonna do. Like it doesn't. At the end of the day, as much as it might make political significance, and maybe as things go on, as ripples go on, from an economic standpoint or this standpoint or that standpoint, it might somehow impact us. But unless something wild happens, and I mean wild, like we don't have the threat of Palestinians at our back door, and we don't have the threat of Israelis at our door, like gonna get us down. We either side. We don't have terror cells all around us, that are just constantly threatening us. Like, we just don't have it. We just don't have that threat. And that's also another thing that makes it hard to understand some of the stuff that's going on in the Middle East.
Yeah.
especially with that, because literally with Israel and these other groups, like it's just always that way. It's always tense.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy. It's a hard way to live, I would say. I mean,
but I think it is.
Yeah. All right. Do we want to move on?
Yeah, I think we better.
You okay if I do a lighter topic, or do we need?
Yeah. No, let's do something super heavy. Okay. No, I'm joking. Yeah. Well, yeah. Lighten up the mood, Corey.
Corey. I don't think this is going to be a real gotcha sort of thing, but I did wonder, because I really don't know. Again, I come from a church that had the tradition of no traditions, so I wondered, because you mentioned, well, we've talked about it several weeks, that LWML Sunday is this Sunday. So,
yes.
Did I get the letters?
That is correct. LWML, Lutheran Women's Missionary League.
Yeah, I'm kind of, like I've said before, I'm undiagnosed dyslexic. So every time I say it, I'm like, oh, I hope I got those in the right order. But we wear purple, so I'm excited for that. Wear purple. But then you mentioned that and I don't even know what the name of it is, but
the paraments.
Is that what the paraments?
Yeah.
You said those will not be purple, but
that is correct.
And so my question is, because we didn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And what is kind of what's the tradition behind it? Is that something that is really kind of from like the synod, kind of like that's something sort of organized through that, or is this sort of like on a individual church basis? Because I really don't know.
It's much more historical.
That's what I figured it probably is.
Yeah. No, it's definitely not just synod. Basically, any church that has kind of a historical basis will actually go with the parament colors.
Okay. And the parament,
not LWML Sunday. That's just the Lutheran.
Yeah. But say the name of it one more time.
Paraments. Yep.
Is that what are specifically the paraments, though?
So in our church, we typically talk about the hangings that are hanging on the lectern, and the pulpit and the altar.
Okay.
Those are kind of our paraments. Now, some churches will have more, some will have less. They'll have different designs, so on and so forth.
Okay. Yeah. So, because we have some other like banners. I don't know what you want to call them, but kind of on the side of the church and stuff that gets switched out here and there. But those aren't considered the paraments.
Yeah, those are not technically the paraments.
Okay, gotcha.
So the paraments, and I'll be honest with you, from a historical standpoint, I don't know how far back they go. They've been around for a long time, but I don't know how long. So that might be something worth looking up for myself later.
Yeah.
But I do know that a lot of it's just like everything. Everything in church kind of has its own kind of style, its own meaning. And the changing of the paraments and the parament colors actually has some significance. And it goes along with the church seasons. Mm-hmm. So the church has different seasons, and during those different seasons, they focus on a different part or a different aspect of the life of Christ. Mm-hmm. So we're about to go into Advent. Advent starts the beginning of December. That marks the beginning of the church year. And the color for that, now this is actually funny. The new color for that, new, only been around like 100 years. So new is blue.
Right.
The original color is actually violet or purple.
Okay.
And actually, I should clarify, it is technically violet, not purple. The difference is that violet actually has a touch of black in it.
Oh, okay.
It's a slight darker than it is with just regular purple. And that becomes actually significant once you reach a certain point, because the original color was violet. Now, violet, that used to be kind of a royal color, a kingly color, but it was also the color kind of like the robe they placed on Jesus to kind of mock him, and so it is considered a penitential season. And that's what it is. It's a time for us to reflect and to pray, and dare I say, if you wanted to give something up. Now, when I say that, a lot of people are like, well, that's what the Catholics do, not us Lutheran. Like, well, no, we do it as well. We just do it, I guess we'd say differently. Usually whenever I talk to like confirmands and stuff like that, and I talk about, giving stuff up. And again, I know most people are thinking Lent, and they're like, well, Pastor, you keep talking about Advent. And I'm like, yeah, well, guess what? Advent is technically a penitential season, so it goes along with it. But when you give something up, the idea behind it is not to make a big show out of it, not to make a big deal out of it. It should not so radically change everything around your life that everybody notices and says, oh, look at you. It's not about showboating. It's about giving something up as a way of discipline on the body, as a way of kind of reminding even yourself that you worship God and not whatever this is. And then kind of as a third point, it's also a way for you to hopefully refocus yourself. So what I like to say is like, imagine you decided to give up dessert, which is perfectly fine. I mean, giving up dessert is perfectly fine, right? A lot of us don't eat dessert anyway, but if you're a big, like, I got to eat dessert, like, that change, a lot of people might not even notice. You would notice it because you love dessert. But,
right.
If you're a dessert person, again, I'm really not. I mean, chips, man, if I gave up chips, that would be it. Like, but so maybe that's it. Maybe I should.
Yeah.
But, what you do is you take that time, and even if it's only a short amount of time that you would normally eat dessert or eat chips, and you say, okay, instead of doing that, I'm gonna have another session of prayer over here. And you go, okay, I'm going to pray. Like, okay, well, so now you've taken that fast and that fasting from, again, potato chips or whatever it happens to be, and you've now changed it into a moment of prayer. Now, are you going to continue to pray at that time every day? Probably not. Eventually, right, the chips are going to come back and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it is a special time for you to refocus. And that's the idea of kind of a penitential season. You're trying to get rid of things that might be, quote unquote, gods of your life, things that maybe, do this or do that, and give you an opportunity to refocus, retool, refocus. But anyway, so that's the season of Advent. And of course, the penitential season leads up to a massive celebration. In this case, Christmas. Christmas is considered a feast day, a high holiday. So anyway, and then whenever that happens, all the paraments change to a sense of purity, of in this case, white. And then after that, you go on to the Epiphany season. The Epiphany season is all about this idea of Christ making himself manifest. That is to say, revealing who he is. And so, a lot of times we started off with the gifts of the Magi, the kind of thing, and all that, and we kind of say, well, it's the Gentiles' Christmas, and that's a kind of a clever way to put it, but really, Epiphany isn't so much about like a secondary Christmas; it's more about that idea that Jesus is revealing who he is. So a lot of times the text and everything will go around with like miracles and stuff like that. Because all those times are times when Jesus is revealing who he is. And then we move on to Ash Wednesday into Lent. And Lent is another penitential season, a little bit longer than Advent, but again, penitential in its nature. And then it is highlighted, capped off, if you will, by Holy Week. So the penitential season, again, violet. Now, the ancients did this fun thing, and a lot of churches can't do it. We have been blessed at St. John's to have people that can sew.
Yeah.
And it's really fantastic. But the ancients used to do this thing where they would get really excited when you were in a penitential season, and you were closer to the end of the season than you were to the beginning.
Yeah.
And I always tell you, like, because I talk about this at church sometimes too. It's kind of like whenever you go to work on a regular work week and it's Thursday.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. You're still working. You still got another couple days,
right?
But it's a whole lot better than being a Monday.
Yeah, it's on the downslope.
You're on the downslope.
Yeah.
And so what they would do is they took out the quote unquote penitential colors, which is black and blue.
Okay.
So black and blue are considered penitential colors. They strip those out, and so for like one day in the penitential seasons, that's Advent and Lent, you have these, and they're pink. They're technically rose colored, I think is what it's called. But but they're pink. We have
Yeah.
pink paraments, and and yeah, so it's like it's super cool. Like, yeah, so we are blessed at St. John's because we actually have rose colored, and it's it's pretty fantastic. I love it whenever people walk in and they see that for the first. Wow, it's great. It's fun. So anyway, so that's that. And then after that, we have this white that goes along with that idea of purity that comes with Easter. And then after that, we have Pentecost, which is red. Now, I'm going to come back to red in just a second, but it's Pentecost. It's like a main holiday. It's red. Then we go to Trinity Sunday, which is white as a symbol of purity. And then we go to Pentecost, which is green. Now, Epiphany was actually green during the regular, like the weeks after Epiphany. Epiphany itself, I believe, if I remember correctly, is white, but then the days after Epiphany are all green. Pentecost are what they call sometimes ordinary time, or if you use an older church holiday or church calendar, we would call it Trinity, Sundays after Trinity Sunday.
Oh, okay.
So it's all a way of marking time, but it's considered ordinary time. And what that is it's green because it's representing growth. And it's kind of the same with Epiphany, right? It's the growth and the revelation of who Jesus is. Same thing with Pentecost. There's this idea of a plant that grows, and in the case of Pentecost, it's the early church that grows, right? You're seeing the early church, you're seeing the church that grows, and so Pentecost really emphasizes this idea of growth. And that takes you all the way up till pretty much the 3 last Sundays in the church year, which the last one of those is usually called like Christ the King Sunday. And again, just an emphasis on Christ the King. Sometimes the paraments even change to white for that one. There is a celebration of All Saints' Day. Now, we actually celebrate All Saints' Day on the Sunday following November 1st. But November 1st is actually All Saints' Day. And so we celebrate it, and so we turn the paraments white for that one as well. But reality is that unless it falls on November 1st exactly, technically it's the whatever it is Sunday after Pentecost.
Yeah.
Now the red. I told you I'd get back to the red.
Yeah.
So we have special feast days. Think, kids, if there's any kids listening to this, are adults, and you're like thinking, I need an excuse to cook a huge meal. The church has tons of feast days.
There are plenty of excuses.
Giddy up. You know what I'm saying? We have excuses.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's cook some fish or something. I like fish. Oh, man. Anyway, I'm not going to get sidetracked on that. But the red is to mark the blood of the martyrs. So it's blood red.
Okay.
That's the idea of it. So Pentecost, right? You have the Holy Spirit coming to the early church and the spreading of the gospel like fire. But you also have that idea that, hey, these guys are eventually going to get chased out of Jerusalem. Reformation Sunday is usually marked with red. Again, blood of the martyrs. Reformation happened, gospel message was proclaimed, and people died. So you got people that are witnessing to Christ and dying, and so therefore, usually red marks the blood of the martyrs. And so that's a basic rundown of your church year.
Interesting.
And there's a lot of history that goes along with like what the pastor wears too, because you'll notice that the pastor will wear a stole or something known as a chasuble. And I'll be honest, this podcast, I just don't have enough time to go into that this particular time. But one of the fun things is you'll notice that they always match the paraments. And the reason for that is because they're kind of considered part of the paraments. The idea is that if you match the pastor to the paraments, maybe he'll be like invisible. Not realistically, but like it's parament camouflage.
Yeah, you're fitting into.
Yeah. You're part of the ornament of the church. You're not, and again, it kind of goes back down to that thing where, a pastor really is a servant of the church. I know a lot of people want to think, or maybe even pastors want to think that they're somehow, better than other people or greater than but the truth be told is that it's all nonsense. They are a servant of the church, and they're the garb that they wear, those robes that they wear, that's kind of their purpose, is to again, make it to where you kind of blend in.
Yeah.
So you're not very noticeable.
Yeah.
So that's the whole point of making them match the paraments, is so that they're not very noticeable at all.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's more to it than that. A stole actually has, some biblical significance. So does a chasuble. I don't want to say that they don't. They do. But the reason that they're colored the way they are and the way they match the paraments is so that the pastor blends in.
Interesting.
See? Even though I'm not really a big hunter, I still wear camouflage every Sunday.
There you go. That's interesting, though. And another thing I wonder is, I'm sure a lot of those we have been around for a long time. I would assume. And is that something to where? I mean, I just like, if somebody currently was like, "Well, I can sew, and I'd love to like do something." Is that something like? I assume a lot of people, especially when something's been in a church for a long time, and it's like someone can say, "My great grandmother made that," or whatever. But is there ever? I don't know if there's ever a time that, or a reason for someone who can make something like that.
Yes, there is. In fact, we have some ladies in the church that actually make paraments. Like I said, we've been blessed to have pink paraments.
Yeah.
The green paraments were actually some of the first that were sewn by a lady of our church and her mom. And then the pink ones were kind of what they did in terms of following up with that. And so, there is a time. And some of our paraments, they're great. They're some of them are older. You're right, but some of them have just been worn down. A lot of these are store bought, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And I always tell people, if you are really good at sewing, and you're really good at doing these kinds of things, learn how to do liturgical wear. Learn how to do paraments and liturgical wear, because there is money in it if it is hand sewn.
Yeah.
It takes time, a lot of time, but you pay for that time.
Yeah.
And as a church, I can tell you, I mean, like, you go onto a website and you can find a set of paraments for $200-$300, so it's not too bad. But then you want hand sewn, you're looking at $900,000, something like that. Jeez. I mean, so it goes up there. Yeah. And, looking at the amount of material and stuff you need maybe $200 worth of material, but it's all time.
Yeah.
It's time and effort, and, again, having a church that wants to buy it, of course, but, so they can get really expensive. So having a group of ladies in our church that do awesome, that just do fantastic, and they make, it just looks so beautiful. It's just wonderful. Yeah. And so, yeah. So we do. And if you are interested, by the way, in doing such a thing, contact me. I will put you in contact with the people that do this. And I believe they do plan to start a new one at some point here in the near future. Yeah, I forget what color they're doing this time.
That's interesting, because I would kind of assume we kind of have like a set of them, and it's just kind of like, we don't really need new ones. But I assume they would get worn out eventually, but
again, they do get wore out. Some of them, most of them, in fact, are actually store bought from some time ago, and they do get wore out for sure. But then the other fact is that because we bought these things over years and years and years, some of them don't match the others. So, for instance, our red paraments have, like, on the lectern and the pulpit, have these like two things that kind of hang down, whereas the rest of them are like a solid flat piece of fabric. Oh, and so it's just different, you know. And again, that's an older style versus a newer style, and it's like we kind of switched to the newer style, but we still have the red paraments, and so it's like, and I think there's another one that does that too. I just can't think of which one it is. Yeah, but so you have that as well. Again, and they're in the process. They're trying to make new ones for, the ones that are, again, that are wearing out, because they've been there forever and ever and ever. And, you're right. You wear them out when you pull them out, put them on, take them off, whatever. Yeah. And it's just like any fabric. It'll wear out over time.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I had no idea.
Oh, yeah. But again, that's one of those things. Like, everybody walks into church on Sunday and they don't know, they don't know one from the other, right?
Some people... it always cracks me up, because there's always someone who's like, aren't the paraments really beautiful? and someone will go like, "Yeah, what are they? Are they new?" And there's always somebody who's like, they probably don't even notice that they're a different color at all. You know, they're just like, oh, whatever. You know.
Yeah.
So,
and what's really funny is usually right after they switch, a lot of times I as a pastor forget. Right, I can sit here and talk to you about when you're supposed to switch all I want. Yeah. The reality is Sunday morning I wake up and it's been green or like Pentecost colors for like the last 4 months or whatever. I'm going to put on a green stole, and then I'll walk out and I'll go, oh, wait, it's supposed to be white. Go back and change. So I've done that. I used to have there's a gal in early service who used to watch that. She used to call you out on it. Oh, yeah? Oh, she was awesome. She was so awesome. But, yeah, she used to call you out on it. Like, you're wearing the wrong stole. Okay, sorry. Going back.
Well, that's great. That's great.
But, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, again, that's a great question. One that we spend a lot of time on, me personally, looking at, thinking about, and all that kind of fun stuff. But yet most people don't realize it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Like I said, everything in the church ultimately has a way of pointing back to Christ. That's the purpose of it.
Right.
And the paraments are the same. But we get so used to them, I think sometimes we forget that they adjust and they change. But yeah.
Well, I do a majority of my, I said, but I'm facing the opposite direction a lot of times. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I kind of forget, and I'm sitting close, so I don't look up a lot.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it's like I kind of forget. Yeah. And then when you pointed that out, I thought, well, I need to ask about that because I really don't know much about it.
So wear purple this week.
And
then you're going to wear green for like another month.
Okay.
I mean, right at the end of October, you can wear red. October 29th, you can wear red for Reformation Sunday. But then you go back to green again.
Okay.
And you can wear green, I think, most of November. Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll keep people updated on what to wear.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, get a green jacket or something. I don't know. I don't know how it works.
Well,
you're DPG Corey Doremus.
Yeah, that's right. The contemporary DBG or DG.
That's right. That's right.
Man, see, that's my bro.
See, I'm going to keep using. I'm eventually going to change his name.
I'm going to do. Contemporary DGP.
Yeah, DGP.
Yeah. I'm going with that.
That's what you are.
Title now.
That's right.
All right. All right. Well, we want to do basics of the faith. Then?
Yeah, I think it's that time.
I think
it's that time. What commandment are we on?
Oh, now you're asking me.
No, I know. I know which one we're on.
Okay, good. Because I'm like,
giving you a hard time. We're on the commandment that nobody wants to cover. I mean, nobody ever wants to cover.
Which one is it?
The sixth commandment.
And what can you say it just so?
I don't know if I can. Can I say it on the radio?
You can't.
Thou shalt not commit adultery is the commandment. The explanation says that we should lead a sexually pure and decent life. ... Lots of. So anyway. So, yeah, we could talk about this. And I'll tell you how I like to talk about it.
Okay.
This is how I talk about it with the confirmands to avoid anything too sketchy.
Right.
I always talk about it like this. Do you remember the story of the three little pigs?
Yes.
Right? 3 pigs, they build 3 houses. One's out of straw, one's out of sticks, one's out of stone, right? Or brick. And then the wolf comes and huffs and puffs and yada, yada, yada. We know the story, right? That's the 3 little pigs story.
Okay.
And I know, right? You're like,
I'm trying how is this connecting to it? Okay, go on.
Imagine, if you will, that looking down at the pigs' houses that they built, that their floor plan was identical. And in fact, they actually had the foundations laid the same way. And so all their foundations are the same.
Okay.
Everything about their house is the same, except what it's built out of. It's a 1% difference. At most, it's a 1% difference. But that 1% difference has massive implications, massive results. when we get to this commandment, what we're talking about is the fact that God designed us in a certain way, to live in a certain way, to be in a certain way. Husband and wife, one man, one woman. Again, we can talk about that a little bit because polygamy is in the Old Testament everywhere. But really, one man, one woman, husband and wife. They're to bear children and all that kind of fun stuff. This is the groove that God created us to function in. Well, what if you have 1% difference? It doesn't seem like that big of a difference, but yet that 1% difference, just like the Three Little Pigs story, can have huge implications. And a lot of times, whenever we see this commandment broken, especially, that tends to be it. We tend to find somebody who says, okay, I agree with 99% of what you say, but I don't agree with this 1% over here. And then what we're seeing is that 1%, even though it's a small little thing, can have huge implications. And so thou shalt not commit adultery. Adulterate means to kind of add a poison complex. So you can adulterate water if you add like a piece of poison in the water. Then it adulterates it. It lacks purity now. And that's kind of the same thing. So again, one of the problems that I think that we face in the world today is that we have a tendency to look at this commandment and we fixate on one thing, whatever the buzzword of the day is, and we tend to forget all the rest. So for instance, there for a while, the big buzz thing was like, same-sex marriage. Like, yes, is that a derivation of man and woman in Christ? Yeah, well, yeah, it is, absolutely. And so therefore we are against that. Absolutely. God created us one man, one woman in Christ, and that in terms of marriage. But then we tend to say, okay, well, we're not gonna pay attention to things like pornography. Well, like, no. That counts too. That's actually a form of that 1%. It's not that big of a deal. Oh yeah, it is. Again, because it might only be something very minor, but it's a 1% thing. It is actually got massive implications. And again, I don't want to make this podcast go too deep down this rabbit hole.
Right.
But the reality is that they're finding all kinds of medical problems with people that watch that kind of stuff a lot. And it's not healthy. It's not good for you. It's not good. Same thing with adultery in terms of like having an affair or having another lover or something like that. Again, it might seem that one doesn't seem like it's that minor, but at the same time, it's like at the same time we can kind of see this whole thing where it's like people are constantly arguing for this 1%. And the problem is that even 1% has massive, massive issues. And so, yeah, instead of focusing on how we can get around this commandment, why not focus in instead on what this commandment is about? And that is, what is marriage about? And the way we have been designed by God is in our marriage and in our relationship is truly a beautiful thing. Paul lays it out in Ephesians 5, starting with verse 22. Verse 22 almost always gets all the attention because it's the one that strikes us as off. It literally the verse 22, chapter 5, verse 22 is literally, wives, submit to your husbands. And everybody goes, oh, no. No, that is not the way this works.
Yeah.
And then they go around, they say, well, how can we get around this word submit? Right? Because it's always about getting around it, right?
Right.
And then I always say, don't do that. Like, look, the word literally means to submit. It literally means to place oneself underneath. It actually comes from a Greek word that's what it means. So submit, probably about the nicest way you're going to be able to translate that.
Yeah.
But then what I do, especially whenever I do like couples therapy and stuff like that for like, getting ready for marriage and weddings, I take them all the way back to Genesis 3. And why I take them back to Genesis 3 is because whenever God is kind of cursing, so you're talking about the fall of mankind, Adam and Eve, ate the apple, they hid from God, God calls them out, Adam blames Eve, Eve blames the serpent, and then God starts dishing out these kind of curses, and he curses the snake first, the serpent first, and then he curses Eve. And one of the curses for Eve that we a lot of times read right past is this part where it says, your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. And we go, and again, women kind of scoff at it. They go, my desire. And to be honest with you, I get why they would say that. It comes off funny, which is why we probably read right past it. But if you go just one chapter later to chapter 4, and I think it's verse 6 or 7, that same word, even the Hebrew root of that word, comes up again. And this time it's God talking to Cain, and he talks about how sin desires Cain. And it's at that point that if you put those two things in context, you go, okay, this word means to desire control, to desire to rule over. And once you put that in its context, then all of a sudden that curse in verse 3 comes to light. Eve's part of Eve's curse is that she is going to desire to rule over her husband, but her husband, just from a purely physical standpoint, is going to rule over her. That is to say, and again, there's exceptions to every rule, but usually a wife or a woman has less strength than a man. There's just muscle density, bone density, and all these kind of fun and exciting things. Is just the way we were constructed. And that's kind of what that verse is kind of pointing to. The woman is going to have that desire to rule over, but the man is ultimately going to be too powerful, just in pure strength, and then you take that all the way back to Ephesians 5, and Paul is basically flipping that on its head, and he's saying, like, look, no, your job as a wife is to submit, to place yourself underneath your husband. Because how can you lift up your husband? How can you lift up your husband if you don't place yourself underneath them? And then everybody quits reading, because that's all the further guys want to read, because it makes us all feel good.
We won. Yeah.
We won. And then so we don't read verse 25, which says, husbands, love your wives. And again, I always jokingly say, see, women, you're not commanded to love your husband, but he's got to love you, because it's a command from God, which is a good for a chuckle. But the reality is that as Paul continues to describe this, he says, as Christ loved the church, giving himself up for her, sacrificing for her. And I always say, look, this is the job of the guy, right? And we always think of sacrifice in courageous terms. Somebody breaks into the house, I got you, man. I'm gonna be your knight in shining armor.
Yeah.
And I always say that's great, but the reality is that while that's certainly part of it, right? That's certainly part of your job as a husband or as a man. The other part is also true, and that is that Jesus sacrificed for us in more ways than just that. He sacrificed for us in the ways in which we couldn't do, and he purified his bride, the church, and he lifted her up. And so I say, this is the job of the man. Even though he has the power, he can sacrifice of himself so that he can lift up his bride. Not quite the same as submit, but yet similar effects, right? The wife submits to the husband so that she can lift up her husband. The husband sacrifices for his wife so that he can lift her up. And this is kind of this beautiful marriage that we see. And this is the way marriage is supposed to be. This is the way God designed it to be. And then, Paul follows up by saying, but the man is the head of the house. And then again, men come back. Aha, I got it again.
Got it. We won.
We won.
Case closed.
And I always say, that's not what most guys think it is. That's not the I get to buy whatever I want and do whatever I want and nobody gets to stop me. No. That's not what that verse is saying. What that verse is saying is that you are the religious head of the household. Your kids are going to follow you. And that means that if you don't go to church and your kids don't go to church, that's on you as the husband, as the father. That's your job. That's your responsibility. And you can't just say, well, church is women's work or church is for the woman. No. You're the head of the household. You're the man. To kind of insert some language into Paul here, I would say Paul's basically saying, buck up, boys, get it done.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what's going on is, and I mean, again, we can look at this from the biblical standpoint, and then we can also turn around and look at some statistics, and that's actually been played out over and over and over again. Every time they've ever studied it, the father going to church has a huge impact on the children. And again, I don't want to diminish the role of the women. They have a huge role too, but this is kind of the job of the men. And I mean, one of the funniest ones, and I say funny, it's really not funny, but it's one of the most humorous ones that I pull out is like they did this big study in like Sweden of all places, and they actually tallied it up, and it was like the statistics were striking. It was like if a mom went to church and took the kids, but dad didn't, the children had something like a 35% chance of continuing on in church. If both of them went to church, it was like a 75% chance of going to church. If dad went to church and mom didn't go to church, it was like a 72%.
Oh, wow.
So like the addition of mom going to church with dad was only like a 3% increase. But it just really showed the fact that fathers really desperately need to be going to church. They really are the head of the household in this regard. And again, it's just the way we've been designed. And I mean, you can go into psychology books and read about this, and they'll tell you like women tend to be nurturers. And again, we're speaking in broad generalities here. There's always exceptions to every rule, but women tend to be nurturers. Kids from like 0 to 12 really depend on their mother. Really, they really need that motherly nurturing care. But when they start venturing out into the world, like how do I live in X, Y, and Z? They tend to either go to their peer groups or their father. And the father at that point plays a bigger role, just a big role in terms of how are they going to live.
Right.
Now, when they get hurt, they're still going to run to mom because mom is still mom and she always will be. But in terms of like looking at life and saying, okay, how do I live in this world? Like they tend to look at dad.
Yeah.
And again, that's just part of the design that God gave us. It's not a I'm better than you or anything else. It's just part of the way we were designed. And we need both.
Yeah.
Because guys are terrible nurturers by default. And I mean, again, we could joke about that, but like have you ever seen The Sound of Music, right? I mean, I get it. It's kind of almost an exaggeration of the point, but
it's a bit of an exaggeration of the actual family, but yeah.
But again, the point is still the same, right? He's like a drill sergeant, and that is a lot of times how guys generally think. Like we just need to be clean, effective, efficient, and that's not really warm and nurturing at all.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, you need women and men both. You just got to have, and neither one is better than the other. You need them both. And in marriage, you see that beautiful union, which is what the sixth commandment is all about.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
That's right. We made it all the way back around. It took me a while, but
we got there.
From the Three Little Pigs to The Sound of Music.
So have you ever seen the hula hoop game where you get a bunch of people and they all put their finger under the hula hoop, like you put just like your pointer finger under it, and then they hold it and then they let go, and you're supposed to bring the hula hoop down to the ground, like level. Have you ever seen this game?
No.
Okay, so this is an old like snowball trick game. Like my school used to do snowball, and which was like a drug-free weekend thing. Anyway, it's a team building activity, and what typically happens, especially the first time you do it, is that they set the hula hoop, and then the person lets go of it, and then one person kind of goes up a little bit, and then it tilts. So the people who are lower, then they raise theirs up because they're trying to
even it out. Yeah.
And then that person, they keep raising it, and the hula hoop goes up, 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 and up, and up, and up naturally.
Yeah.
And that's typically what happens. So people have to fight the urge to like correct it. And so I'm thinking like when you talk about a wife going under, like putting themselves underneath the husband, and they're to lift them up, and the husband's supposed to lift his wife up, and it's kind of like that sort of idea of if they keep correcting that they both raise each other up.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, absolutely. I like it. We got illustrations going on here. I like it. But it is true though. I mean, like, right? That's the beauty. Like, that's the way it's supposed to be. Right? This is in our human nature, our sinful nature, the original sin has crept in, has messed this all up. To the point where we spend all of our time saying, who wears the pants in this family, instead of how can I lift my partner up? How can I support them or be somebody for them? Really, it should almost be like a competition to see who can lift the other up the most.
Right.
But it doesn't work. It just does not work if only one person is the one doing all the work and the other person's just like, do everything. Like, that doesn't work. Like, that doesn't work. If you got one person who's trying to be the controlling person and the other person's just trying to lift that one up, that's like how you get a kind of like a husband that's a dictator, kind of thing, or a wife that's a dictator for that.
Yeah.
You got to have that kind of understanding that, hey, we're both going to lift each other up. And, and of course, when we get into the psychology of marriage, there's a lot more to it than that. But from a biblical perspective, this is kind of like our biblical definition of what marriage should be.
Right.
And this is, by the way, and you'll read this, if you read in Ephesians 5, Paul kind of comes back around and he says, like, look, and there's a reason that this is all over the place, because this is Christ, the groom, and his bride, the church. And so we have this great example that's set right before us, that's in front of us everywhere, where Christ sacrifices himself and lifts up the church, but then the church turns around and says, no, not us, you, Lord, you. And we lift up the Lord, because that's what we are called to do as Christians. And so you get this beautiful imagery where we're not trying to go over and say, well, we're the king of Christ. Like, no, that would be silly.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And Christ isn't ruling over us with like this weird iron fist. Like, he's merciful, he's gracious, and so he sacrifices of himself for us, and then we turn around and lift him up and submit to him. So yeah.
That's interesting. Interesting way to put it.
Sixth commandment. Everybody avoids it, but
didn't
it's really
want to
awesome.
Didn't want to talk about it, but yet here we are.
It's awesome,
and we're alive.
And we are.
We made it through. It was toughy, but we got it. All right, well, we better get to church chatter.
Oh, man, church chatter. So much.
Well, obviously, we've already talked about it. LWML Sunday this
LWML
week.
Sunday. Wear purple, everybody.
Yeah.
Wear purple. So I actually have a tie that's like LWML, and I gotta find it. I haven't looked for it, so I hope I can find it. I don't wear ties very often. I used to wear ties like every day. Now I hardly ever wear a tie. Yeah. So I gotta find this tie, but it's a LWML tie, and so yeah, I'll be wearing my LWML garb.
Oh yeah, I got a purple shirt. I'm gonna be.
Oh yeah, you're rocking the purple shirt.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's a big day. There's lots of stuff that's kind of going on. And even today in the church office, I'll be honest, I was working with the secretary trying to get everything kind of organized. Those mites that they collect, and we usually highlight it at the end of the month. I think that's when they collect them as well. And they get these little boxes and they collect these mites, and it's like, you just don't realize the significance of what they're doing until you start reading about it. Like even in our Central Illinois district, like that's where we're at, the Central Illinois district. Even there, we have like grants for $10,000 here and grants over here for this, and it's like they're doing big things with a small little box, with the small mites.
Right.
And the LWML has been a true soldier of our synod for a long time in terms of I want to say women's groups. I think they're like the main one, and we have two different. How to say that? So we have two different. We have the Epiphany, and we also have Rebecca Circle, which are the two make up the two main groups within our church. So we actually have two LWML groups. And so we're doing that, and we're gonna have like a video in the slideshow in early service. Well, probably both services, assuming I can get the computer to do it right.
Yeah.
I say that because last time I showed a video, I got the audio and everything to work at church perfectly. But if you were live streaming, ooh, buddy.
Oh, it's not working.
It screeched.
Oh.
Because something with the audio. Anyway, point being is I'm going to figure that out. That's going to be one of my tasks tomorrow, to figure that out. I got an idea. I got a pretty good idea what it was, so I'm not too concerned about it. But it did happen. So anyway, joy to the world. Anyway. So we gotta deal with that, but we have some other stuff. So it's exciting.
Yeah,
it's exciting. So always look forward to the LWML Sunday. It's always fun, and then I also get to always talk about wearing purple and getting out my tie.
That's right.
I wear this tie like one time a year, so I always look in favor.
It's important.
Yeah.
It's
exciting. It's exciting.
So then we got Harvest Fest coming up in a few weeks.
Yeah, Harvest Fest comes up in October, end of October, October 29th. I tell you what, I've been watching the farmers out there, and they are doing, they're really out there moving.
I feel like I'm way more observant of this now after working at St. John's, because I didn't really pay that much attention to it before. But considering so many people in our church are farmers, I just am driving around with my family, and I'm going like, wow, man, that whole field's already done. My wife's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I mean, it's harvest, but it's like, man, that's quick, I feel like. And she's like, what do you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, I really don't. But I feel like it was quick. I feel like a lot of them have been, going through. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's it's always fun. I always love working, since I've been working here. And again, my previous church in Wausau, Wisconsin, loved them, but a lot of teachers, a lot of hospital workers, had a couple lawyers in there, but no farmers, really.
Really? Yeah.
I mean, there was some retired farmers, if I remember correctly, but no real farmers. But here, it's so completely different. I love the fact that you go, well, we have a meeting on such and such day, and somebody will say, I'll be there if it's raining. Basically saying, like, if it's not raining, I'm in the fields, and I'm not going to be there.
Well, I feel like it hasn't really rained as much. Last year, I remember it rained a lot.
Yeah,
kind of right around harvest. So a lot of people are like, man, well, I got to take like a day off, because the soil's too, soggy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And this year has been really good. We've had like one big, few days of rain, I guess.
Yeah.
Now we are supposed to get rain this weekend.
Uh-oh.
I think like Thursday and Friday or something. So
yeah.
So there's more potential for rain, in which case then they'll be paused for a little bit. But but yeah, I mean, if it keeps going the way it's going, they're going to get done with harvest early, which is basically anything before November. So
that'd be great.
Is early, and I think they're doing pretty good. So yeah. Again, I could be wrong on that, but I don't think so. I think they're doing pretty good from what I understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, always fun to kind of pay attention, to think about all that stuff that's going on. And I also love it too. And again, I realize like this is church chatter and all this kind of stuff, but at the same time, it's like, it gives you a whole new respect for all that they do when you actually see what they do.
Oh yeah.
And I only get to see little glimpses of it here and there, but like man, they are busy. They got a lot going on. They do a lot. Our food takes a lot of work, everybody.
Oh, it does. Yeah. It's cool. Like I said, I really, I didn't really have much of a perspective on it, before I came here, and it's really cool to learn about a different culture. Really, it is really a different culture.
Yeah. And their seasons are all determined by the weather and the climate and the ground. And so, it's really fascinating. But yes, our Harvest Fest is always the last Sunday of October, which is Reformation Day.
Okay.
And we celebrate Reformation Day on the last Sunday of October because, and I say according to tradition, now there's a little bit of reason behind that, but according to tradition, Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door in the church in Wittenberg on October 31st, 1517. Now, I say there's a little bit of tradition about that because if you actually do the history dive, what you'll find is that I think it's a guy by the name of Melanchthon actually wrote in a letter or something, and he was the one who gave us that date.
Oh, yeah.
There's been a couple other sources that have suggested other dates, but Melanchthon gave us that date, and so we've kind of just stuck with it. And so it's just been the tradition that we kind of celebrate on that day, kind of say, hey, Reformation. So we celebrate Reformation, so it's fun.
Exciting.
So yeah, it is exciting.
Yeah.
It is. It's very exciting. So we look forward to that. We have a concert coming up.
That's right.
An organ concert that's going to be on November 4th at 7 p.m., I think. 7 p.m. So this is one of those things where, again, and, you say organ concert, and everybody's like, well, that's really boring. Like, just show. And, again, I have not heard this young lady play, but I've heard professional organists play, and in terms of like an organ concert,
right?
Now I've seen professional organ players also play for a traditional Sunday service, and yeah, they that's there's not a lot of different but whenever you get a professional organ player to play for a concert, they add things to the music, and it's just beautiful. And I'm hoping that this concert is kind of like that, and I think it will be. So I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So definitely have that to look forward to as well. Yeah. I'm trying to think. What I really need? I need to start calling up people and saying, okay, what's the what's going on in church?
What's the gossip? Who's got a secret we all need to talk about?
When we first started this, we said we weren't going to call it gossip.
Yeah.
Because it's not really gossip. It's just but yes, I almost said it anyway.
You almost said it.
But the other day I was talking to somebody at church, and they were like, "Oh yeah, did you hear about the people fixing the roof?" And I was like, this is what I need for church chatter.
Right.
I'm like, what's everybody talking about? And so I just thought about it. Like, I need to start calling some of these people up and be like, what's going on? What are you guys actually talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. What is the church chatter?
What is the church chatter?
What we need is a really good group of people who can write in every week.
Yes.
When we say write in, I mean, no one's really writing in letters, but just sending have a
handwriting by pen.
Yeah. Like a Facebook group or something where they just said oh, this is what, we're talking about this, and then we can talk about it.
We need something.
Yeah.
I love it because right now we're just like, this is coming up. And I mean, to be honest, that is a lot of what, people are talking about. I have heard some people talk about we still have some stuff in the old chapel. We still haven't quite adjusted for, when we moved with all the asbestos stuff.
Yes.
So a lot of organization is still taking place. That's just a long haul. But some people have kind of asked. And so I'm like, there it is. There's some conversation about what goes where and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I actually spent the reason I bring that up is because I actually spent some of today looking for an old video I had in some of that stuff, and I was like, I know it's here somewhere.
Yeah.
Looking through all that and just going, oh, where did it go?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, Vinny, I will say I do have chicken in my freezer that's defrosting. You might be going, what? But I have not tried the noodles yet, I'll admit. I haven't. And it's not because I don't want to, it's because we've just been so busy.
Yeah, I know.
And it's like you got to actually take some time
to
cook a homemade chicken noodle soup. So I got chicken defrosting, and I'm hoping next week I can make a comment on the noodles. Yeah,
I did. I made some chicken noodle soup with mine, and I only used half the bag because I was like, oh, I gotta. So I'll probably make chicken noodle soup again, but the weather's perfect for it, right?
It is. It is perfect for it. So I need to have some.
We have fall perfection right now.
Oh, I love it.
Beautiful.
I love
it. And now back to your show on NPR. That's right.
Back to NPR.
Oh, man. And with that little jab at NPR, I think we're actually out of time, or at the very least, I'm out of stuff to talk about. So anyway, anyway, thanks everybody for tuning in, listening, downloading, however you listen. Thank you for joining us, and have a great week. Goodbye.
Bye.